President Saravanan, Secretary Mr. Periyar, the Rotarians of the Madras South, other guests. It's a privilege to be invited to speak to you on this important topic. Of course, the President, when introduced, hinted about the various ongoing controversies in Tamil Nadu, very live and extremely perturbing also, and politically very important at the moment. But given shortage of time, unless there are questions subsequently, I may not go into the hot topics in that sense, but prefer to give you a little bit of a more of a broader understanding of the issue, particularly from the point of view of the coastal environment. The broader question about environment versus development is of course a global one and an ongoing one in all sectors. So it's a very, very huge topic, but I will focus more on the coast and in that too particularly the Indian coast, what's happening. It is probably the first place to start, or the first point to start would be how does one define the coast? If you look at literature, we talk about certain UN documents will start about what population lives within 50 kilometers from the sea. There will be another document which talks about the activities taking place 100 kilometers from the sea. So depending on the purpose and the need, you find that the boundaries of the coast are quite elastic according to who uses it and why. Today I would like to keep it very narrow because there is a live issue at the moment around that issue, and therefore it is perhaps more relevant to keep it narrow. At one level, it is useful to look at the coast or the coastal stretch or the coastal area as where land meets sea. The Tamil word kadakkarai is a beautiful, it captures, it's where the kadal and the karai meet. So that is really the coast that I am going to talk about. So the place where the sea and the land meets has a great deal of significance. First of all, we know that the 2/3 of the globe is water, and this water is a huge thing with so much of energy and force. The waves, the air movements, the rotation of the earth, all create various kinds of forces that actually the land mass is actually protected by this small stretch of area which we call the coast. It acts as a barrier between the land mass and the sea. So it is somewhere very crucial. It is the interface between the land mass on which we live and the sea, which has so much of energy and importance in this globe. So this particular stretch plays a very great important role. It is a very dynamic stretch. It is not static like most of our land mass. It is constantly in various kinds of movements are taking place on the coast. Various transformations are taking place. Various processes are taking place. So where the land meets the sea, you know, many of the things you can imagine, because we are living in a coastal city and we are familiar with the coastal area. One, the rivers go and meet the sea. So where the river mouths, the deltas, the estuaries, the backwaters, they are part of this coastal zone. Then you have some lovely beaches, sandy beaches. There are parts of the coast in India itself where we have rocky beaches, big rocks, cliffs. So a whole range of formations are there on the coast, and these are between the sea and the land and play a very important role. One obvious role that they play is this coast absorbs the force of the sea when it comes and meets the land, the waves. You can see how the waves come with so much energy, and the coastal stretch, like a shock absorber, absorbs that shock. And it otherwise ensures that it's not transmitted further inland. There are places on the Indian coast where, if you have been to north coast of India, Bombay and beyond, Gujarat, you will see that there is an intertidal zone which can be kilometers. I think Bombay Marine Drive, when it is low tide, you can see kilometers. So it goes up to 12 kilometers in stretches in Kutch, the intertidal zone. So the sea loses its energy, the waves loses the energy over a 12-kilometer stretch, and then becomes almost like a lake when it reaches the shore. So while here our Marina Beach and other beaches, these are sandy beaches. So the huge waves will come and crash, especially Kanyakumari, you have surely gone, where we have the tallest waves in India. They come and then they break on this sandy beach, and the energy is just beautifully absorbed, and that we don't get a shock. So it's a very important thing, ability to absorb. Then the water goes through from the land to the sea, from the mountains, the rivers come and reach. It slows down, it creates a very different kind of ecosystem. Backwaters are one type of ecosystem, you have the estuary, then you have the deltas. So various ways in which various kinds of land formations provide a useful buffer between land and sea. Something that we may often not think too much, but I know in some states like Gujarat, this is something all people living anywhere near the coast will be aware of. Saltwater intrusion. It is the coast that keeps your water in the interior pure or fresh, non-saline. Where high erosion areas like Pondicherry, for instance, high eroding coast. More, I will not get into why it is high eroding. High eroding. Sea water has intruded. Farmers are not able to get good water. This thing is affected. So the buffer of a coast, once you lose, it starts affecting normal life in the interior. So a large number of important functions the coastal stretch is performing. And it is in this context that in India, way back in 1991, there is a little bit of a story even before that I will tell you a little later. The idea was conceived that we leave a certain stretch, an area, which was arbitrarily designated as 500 meters, as a kind of an area which we try to preserve, which we don't overdevelop, which we allow to maintain the role that it's supposed to play. And we call this a coastal regulation zone. So the first notification under the Environment Protection Act came in 1991 for this 500 meter stretch. The technical definition of that may be shared at least briefly without getting into nuances. The coastal stretch as defined at that time was this high tide line, that is the high tide line, the highest high tide line in a year. So that is the point from which 500 meters landward, and then the entire intertidal zone, low tide to high tide. This is considered the coastal stretch for the purposes of the regulation. It is not a scientific regulation, scientific definition, it is an arbitrary definition, 500 meters. Where you have river mouths, where you have creeks, wherever there is salt water, up to the point where you have salt water intrusion, that is 5 ppm and things like that, they have defined some limits, that is considered also part of the coast. So that coastal water body, you have about 100 meters on either side, is once again a buffer. So the coastal regulation zone is intertidal zone plus 500 meters from the sea, and from creeks and water bodies with saltwater intrusion about 100 meters. I am just simplifying matters, there are a lot more nuances to it. So this was declared as a thing, and the whole idea was that this area should not be overdeveloped. We retain it to the extent that it can perform the coastal function most effectively. The reality was, even way back in 1991, fair amount of the coast was already well developed. You have the big cities, Chennai and Bombay, Visakhapatnam, some big metros are there. A large number of towns are there. Right up to the beachfront, a lot of construction has taken place. So in view of all these things, the coast was subsequently therefore defined under this law, divided into 3 zones. Coastal regulation CRZ, I'll stick to the acronym, it's easier. CRZ1 is the area that they consider most important for preservation, where to the extent possible, no other activity should be permitted. And this CRZ1 would typically consist of things like mangroves. So mangrove forest would be considered CRZ1. Sand dunes. Sand dunes have disappeared in most of the Tamil Nadu coast. I was there in Orissa and I have some photos of some huge sand dunes. So the sea coming in, it's a huge barrier, you know. So sand dunes are very important to protect. Then this whole intertidal zone, it plays a very important role in this buffer between the sea and land. That is also CRZ1. Then near sea areas like the coral reefs, which are also very important ecologically, they are also, it is also considered CRZ1. So areas within the CRZ, areas or particular kind of formations which require highest level of protection is considered CRZ1. And that area, the regulations are generally tough in terms of what can be done and what cannot be done. Very little construction activity would be permitted. Maybe a pipeline, maybe things which are least intrusive, but beyond that it is not supposed to take place. The CRZ2 is the other extreme. You have Chennai, you have Bombay, you have construction almost right up to the seafront. The chance, there is very little left to protect. So the idea was CRZ2, you can't do too much. History, it is history, you are not going to rewrite history. But whatever is left, after the last authorized construction or last authorized road, seaward of that area is to be protected. That is all. It could be 10-meter stretch, it could be 200, depends on the town and the city. That is supposed to be protected. Rest of it, building rules as per town planning will apply. That's all. Then CRZ3, which is still the largest area or the longest stretch, is the rural areas. So there they came up with the idea that 200 meters from the sea, we keep it as a no development zone. And 200 to 500, restricted development. So this is the whole, the regime was conceived on this kind of a formula. Most of our fishing villages, for instance, would be under CRZ3, they are rural areas. Many of them are also within 200 meters. So as I said, the idea was not to rewrite history, throw out people, but you can at best maintain your houses, you are not expected to expand your house. If you want to build a new house, you can have to go beyond 200 meters or beyond 500 if you can. So this is the regime which came up in 1991. At that time, it was not taken much note of. It came as a result of environmentalist lobbying with the Ministry of Environment, which was a relatively young ministry and therefore still very enthusiastic about its mandate of protecting the environment. And this particular CRZ has a more interesting history which I mentioned. It goes back to the early 80s when Mrs. Gandhi, probably visiting Goa or somewhere, was horrified by some horrible structures right next to the sea and wrote a letter to the chief ministers of the coastal states saying, you know, why are you allowing this kind of anarchic development on the coast? Keep 500 meters at least free so that everybody can enjoy the pleasure of the beach and not just some awkward structures come up. And court cases have been fought and won on the basis of Mrs. Gandhi's letter to the chief ministers. In fact, in our own circles, it's a sort of a joke but very serious one. The CRZ was much better protected with Mrs. Gandhi's letter than when it became a law of the government, post-91. Post-91, 91 is a coincidence. It is also the landmark here in watershed in Indian economy, Manmohan Singh's first budget and the opening up of the Indian economy. So this has had huge impact on our economy across development, across the board. But for the coast it is very important to understand why it is particularly more important for the coast. The rapid development that has taken place and the significance of the coast for that needs to be understood. First, we have a huge increase in economic activity and a lot of import-export, and 95% of export-import is by sea. So, ports, one important requirement. Pre-91, ports were always government activity. So every 5-year plan, even if you had one port, it was a big thing. So the port development would take place at the snail pace. the so-called Hindu rate of development, Hindu rate of growth. But post 91, it has become an activity for the private sector. And the central government and the state governments don't have to invest even anything. They just have to provide access to the coast, and there are people ready to invest. So somebody has some activity on the coast, he doesn't want to go to the Madras coast where all the unions and others will hold up his stuff for 2-3 days. He wants immediate access, so he asks for a port. So this is great, immediate. So port, demand for port. The rapid economic development means we need more electricity, more power. And as of now, though suddenly we have a very good development of solar energy in the last 3-4 years, but otherwise, we have been totally dependent on thermal power. And thermal power, because of the poor quality of our Indian coal, imports from Australia and Indonesia. Shiploads of coal coming to wherever and then taking them to Ooty or Kodaikanal to put up a power plant doesn't make any sense. So put it right next to the coast. Nuclear power plants, they don't import coal from anywhere. But they need a radius of exclusion. Nobody should be there around the radius of 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers. And if you put it right on the beach, half the circle is in the sea, where nobody lives. So you get half the area of exclusion. This is the logic given for Kudangodama and many other places. Why can't you put it beyond 500 meters? Why do you need encroach into the 500 meters? When we asked, the minister was very clear. Our area of exclusion, we are escaping because half of it is in the sea. So the various, and then of course, friend was talking about the tourism requirements and so on. And therefore, sea is a grave, as more and more youngsters, my son and son-in-law, I'm sure the same is the case in all of our families today. They earn today, their first salary is more than our last salary. So they have now time for enjoyment. They don't go and stay in a resort somewhere. So the sea, the beach, the water, the riversides, these are all in great demand. So there's a huge demand for the coast, suddenly. So this nice law of Indira Gandhi's vintage, which came in 91, coincidentally happened at the time when we opened up the economy. First few years, it was taking time before everybody accumulated capital and could start really investing. By late 90s, the pressure on the coast was already there. Everywhere we find the investment coming up, ports, so there's a huge demand. So by the late 1990s, the CRZ was already, in fact the interesting thing was by mid-90s there was no implementation. But then cases started in the Supreme Court. Goa tourism, Goa people are more alert, there are advocates who are ready to take up. They went to the court and the court said, no, this is a violation, stop it. So various projects got stopped, people got woke up, and then the government realized, or the court realized actually, that to manage the coastal zone, you need maps. You need to know where the high tide line is there, you need to know where is the 500-meter line. They have never been drawn. So there is a coastal zone management plan that was supposed to be prepared for this, and it was not being done. So the Supreme Court cracked the whip, gave all state governments something like 2 months or 6 months, and then they sent scientists armed with whatever, and then they went around and measuring and putting satellite images and developed the coastal zone management plans, which told you where is the high tide line, where is the 500-meter line, where is the 100-meter line, where is the no development zone 200-meter line, so that something could be done. But these were all low resolution maps. So if you have a project, and if you are a project holder, you have to commission one of 7 recommended agencies, pay them, and they will come to do the measurement at the cadastral level and give you an actual map where the plot itself will be known where it is. So this is the kind of regime that started around 96 and slowly gathered this thing, and over time a lot of people started understanding, at least those who had to do something on the coast, that there is something about this and it is affecting us one way or the other. So there was a lot of hue and cry about it, so government started slowly amending one by one. This is a notification, it's not a law, it is a notification under the EPA, Environment Protection Act, and therefore administrators have certain amount of power to amend. So they started amending. But even that was not good enough. So by around 2004-2005, they decided that this is very difficult to this thing. So there was a Dr. Swaminathan committee, I call it Swaminathan Committee 1, let's call it 1. The Dr. Swaminathan committee recommended that CRZ be scrapped and we come up with a coastal management zone, where each area you develop a management plan according to local situation rather than a standardized all India pattern in the form of a regulation. So there is much more leeway you can form, so it can be the local body, the panchayat, the municipal corporation, etc. But knowing the history of this and the background, by then a lot more people were also concerned about the coast. The fishermen who were completely ignorant about the regulations till the late 90s when they were affected by various investments coming, also woke up, and for them also the CRZ was a nuisance. There no development zone, no construction, lot of restrictions, so they were also against it for quite some time. Then once the investors came in, they woke up and said, this is the only fig leaf we have, this is the only instrument we have, and they turned supporters of the CRZ. So by 2004-2005 post-tsunami, the fishermen with the environmental group support launched a huge struggle by 2007 to 2010. There was a massive struggle across the coast. All over the coast there was a unity. And state governments woke up to the fact that fishermen are perturbed. The same state government had asked for dilution of the coastal regulation zone. They started writing to the Prime Minister, please do something about it. Then finally in 2009, the whole idea of the CMZ management zone was scrapped. The idea to retain the regulation zone was once again, it was agreed that it will be retained. But there was another Swaminathan committee again too, which recommended the retention of CRZ with further strengthening of various aspects of enforcement. So we have subsequently 2010 we had a new notification which had some improvements, but over the years the various exemptions given for the coastal activity on the coast has continued to increase. Some of the fundamental principles which were there in the 1991 original regulation, if you look, was one, only an activity that requires a seafront can be given permission. So just because I would like to have a building on a coast for myself, that's not a logic. It is an activity that should require a seafront. So that is one important logic. Second thing was no pumping of groundwater in the coastal area, 500 meters, mechanical pumping, only hand wells and drawing. The logic for that is, you have some wonderful water lines, shallow water, sweet water on the coast. But you over extract, it's gone. It becomes saline, and then the salt water intrusion starts into the interior. So the need to cap the extent of groundwater extraction is very fundamental to the CRZ regime. So there are about 3 or 4 such principles that they had brought in. One by one they started diluting all this. So today we have, then of course you have weird kind of things like Greenfield Airport for Bombay was given an exemption on CRZ1, which is mangroves. So this large landmass that we have as India, of course everywhere we have a lot of people, we have so much activity going on. Still it's a very large country area-wise. To leave 500 meters gives some, it's not that there is nothing there, there is a lot there. But some regulation on the 500 meters